Welcome to the Hyper Guy Motivational Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. Sorry, I take these little absences once in a while, but I have this wonderful guest. I've known her for quite a while now. It's Dr. Ariane Corradi. And she's from Europe, which is pretty amazing right now. She's from Brazil, but I'm actually doing this podcast with her. She's in Europe right now. I'll go ahead and hide the place that she's at. Um, so, Doctor, I'm going to go over your background a little bit. She's an executive consultant, an organizational psychologist by trade. She's a certified mentor coach, which she just has been working so hard to get that, and she just finished. She just finished getting that, but she's been mentoring people for many, many years now, including me. A PhD in economic development. She's a former professor at a university in Brazil, and we'll go over that a little bit too with you, Ariane. And she's an author. She just wrote an amazing book. Specifically, her focus is on entrepreneurship and guiding people through difficult times in the entrepreneurship process and building businesses. So thank you so much. I know I probably missed a lot of stuff, Ariane. I know I've missed a lot, but hey.
Thank you,
So
Martin. Thank you for having me here. It's a
yes,
pleasure.
yes. So I'm so happy to have you here. You're one of the smartest people I know. Um, just you speak a lot of languages, and like I said, we can go into all the other things you do, but you're a lifelong academic, and you're really passionate about helping people and getting people from A to B, whatever it is in their personal lives as well as their professional lives. And I wanted to start by asking you, where were you born and raised?
I was born in São Paulo City, in São Paulo State, in Brazil.
And then,
I grew up in different places though, but yes, let's stick with the birthplace.
so did you grow up in a big family, and what was life like growing up in Brazil?
I grew up in a small town. It was an industrial town, and maybe that's where my interest for small businesses and entrepreneurship started. My father was an entrepreneur, has been an entrepreneur for most of his life. And I have two sisters. My parents are alive, and I have three beautiful, one niece and two. I help me, um,
Gra-
male,
gra-
please, nephews.
Nieces and nephews. Yes.
Yes, two nephews and one niece. I'm sorry, I worked in Spanish most of the day today, so I'm sort of mixing up languages
I know
right
because you
now.
speak you
My
speak
apologies.
English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And you're where are you at currently? What part of Europe are you at right now? In right
I'm in
now?
Portugal now.
Oh, you're in Portugal now, yeah. And I know you
Yes.
jump around. You also go to Spain a lot too. So,
Yes.
so, so the question I have for you is, what was life in Brazil like for you? Like, what do you think kind of helped shape you when you were growing up? Did you know you wanted to be an organizational psychologist?
Okay, an interesting story there, if you allow me to share some of that. Uh, in my school, I went to the public school system in Brazil, and in the 80s, giving away my age now. And in my school, we didn't have a library. So I had more books at home than I had at school. It was very poor, actually. And but my parents always loved reading. So there is this system of people, students from university level, who would go to small towns selling books, house after house. And there was this one person, a young lady, maybe she was in her 20s, I don't know, I was under 10. She was a psychology student and she was selling books. And that for me was the kind of sparkling moment when I realized, wow, I can go to places, be a psychologist, and with books. And that was something that turned a kind of a key there. And from there on, I was telling my mother, okay, I want to be a psychologist. I want to be a psychologist. This is a little bit of what happened for me to become a psychologist. Even if my mom would say, well, you cannot pay your bills with psychology. Yes,
So what was it?
that's how it was like.
Was it hard? Because I know in Brazil it's very difficult, and I think in a lot of countries, the United States is very different than other countries in that you can go to high school, you can get your high school diploma, and you can go to a junior college, or you can get it. It's college is very accessible. It's expensive, but it's accessible. Um, in Brazil, I know especially in the public school track, you have to actually test into going to universities and so forth. Was that difficult for you? What was that process like for you?
Okay, you're bringing me back to a very interesting time of my life. It that was a time in which we didn't have Wi-Fi, or not all houses had internet. So what I had was access to the open TV channels, and there was this program called vestibular, means preparation for the tests to get into the university. So I would do recordings of those classes and take notes after my school hours to study for the official test. And I did it the first time just to get to know how the test was. I didn't, well, the results would used to come out in the newspapers for you to have an idea. It wasn't on the website or anything like that. Different world, yeah, I know. It's not like that anymore, just to be clear. But back then, it was like that. I didn't, I went for holidays. It was February, carnival time in Brazil. Um, and I didn't want to buy the newspaper. I didn't want to see the results because I was sure I wouldn't pass. It was my first time. I didn't pay for the training preparation courses. It was really too expensive. But then I was with some people in these holidays, and they were like, "No, come on, buy the journal, buy the newspaper. Let's see." And then my name was there. I had passed in my second option. So this is how it was. And I even couldn't read my name. Somebody else said, "This is your name." It's like, no, no, it's not my name. No, this is your name. So this is how much I believed I could pass the first time. But yes, I did.
So
And I
after,
went to a very, very good public university. And we
yes.
don't pay for public universities in Brazil.
So what was your major in your public university? And then did you get your master's after, or did you go straight to your PhD?
Ah, I did psychology, and then after that, I went to work. Um, I worked as a counselor for children and youth rights. Uh, After that, I did my master. It was just a couple of years afterwards. I went for my master's in the University of Brasilia. It's the best university for organizational psychology. This is what I wanted to do for a living. And I got approved again against some odds. And after my master's, I stayed in Brasilia. That's the capital city of the country. And I stayed there teaching, doing consulting work, doing all kinds of things, helping students to do statistical analysis, all kinds of gigs that when you know some technical skills you can do. And some years later, I decided I should try the PhD. Yeah,
So let me
I
ask you
tried.
this, as for a baseline, and for people that don't know what this is, and I think when we have these conversations, sometimes we forget to, and I'm horrible at this, so this is why I'm saying it, is can you give people out there an idea of what is organizational psychology? What does that mean?
Okay, yeah. Uh, I think that maybe a term that's more common is organizational behavior, and that's an umbrella term for motivation, leadership, organizational culture, um, organizational learning. What else? Power relations in organizations. Yeah, there are many concepts that come under organizational behavior. And organizational psychology is one specific area of psychology that looks at that. So it's people within working settings.
So why is it so important? Why is it even important?
Uh, I think psychologists are the best equipped professionals to look at people within organizations because in psychology we learn to look at how uh, what we do as human beings and what we do in relation to other human beings can build something that we call an organization. Uh, so it's important because you understand how work relations happen, we build them, and how we can improve them, and how we can improve quality of life. And if we improve well-being in organizations, we improve productivity, we improve the quality of services that are provided to society, and we improve the world in a very, very broad way. That's why it's so important.
And what made you get your PhD? You decided that's another jump you made. So you went from the a lot of people go from a bachelor's or their first degree directly to a PhD program. I did it the traditional way as well, which is, or I'm doing it right, which is going to be the BA, and then I have a few master's degrees, but a BA, a few a master's degree, and then the doctorate. What made you decide to take the next step to the doctoral program? And then what was your emphasis?
Um, you may have heard of Fernando Pessoa, this Portuguese writer, 19th century, 20th century. He has a very good book that's called The Book of the Restless People. And one of the things that is in that book is that people who go after things are people who are not satisfied with what they have. They're always searching for something else. And I am restless in that sense. I was doing really well in psychology. I was in a good job. I had a civil servant job back then after my master's as an analyst of science and technology for the Brazilian government. Uh, but I wanted to go for more than that, and I felt there was a gap in organizational psychology to explain other processes beyond human beings and the relationships between them. And then I took the maybe crazy or risky decision to go to a PhD in economics, and that is development economics. This was the jump, and doing that in the Netherlands, not speaking, not understanding the English, not really mastering English, that aside Dutch. Um, but yes, I went there. It was my first time abroad with two huge pieces of luggage plus a backpack. No proper clothing, no nothing, just going for the world and seeing what it would offer me in a way. This is the jump I made to the PhD.
And then what was your focus in your PhD? What was your dissertation focus?
It was this convergence between psychology and economics. So I did research entrepreneurial learning. And why is that? Because small businesses are responsible for more than 90% of all the jobs in developing countries.
Wow.
And we don't have much research about entrepreneurs. We have a lot about multinationals, we have a lot about other kinds of organizations, but we don't have enough, not even close to enough, about entrepreneurs, especially what's called the valley of death. That's the first 3 to 5 years of every business. We have no research about that. And why is that? And there's this economist called Edith Penrose from the 1950s she wrote that actually. That, well, we know learning is very important for any kind of business, but economists see that as a black box. We don't know how to open it, so we just leave it aside. And then I looked at that citation and I thought, well, I'm a psychologist. I know about learning. I can open the black box. And that's all I did with my PhD. I opened the box of learning to look at how entrepreneurs could learn through crisis. It was about the time of the 28 2008, 2009 economic crisis, global crisis.
Well, and so let me ask you this, and it's so funny because you're thinking the same line as me. I was going to ask you about how to navigate the valley of death, and and really quickly before, what is the name of your book? Because you specifically talk about some of the tools and how to navigate that. Um, can you give our listeners the name of your book and what kind of, and we're going to go a deeper dive later into your book as well, but what is the main theme of your book?
The, uh, well, the theme is about entrepreneurial learning through crisis, covering different economic sectors, different types of entrepreneurs. These are people like first-time entrepreneurs, really, really at the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey. And the title of the book, which is in Portuguese, but if I roughly translate it, it would be Crossing the Valley of Death, Learning and Evolution of Nascent Enterprises.
And they can get that on Amazon, correct? Because I found it there.
Yes.
Yeah, they can find on Amazon and they can get translations, I believe, as well. Um, do I guess the biggest. Well, I've got a lot of questions for you, and I'm going to start with this one. Um, so you've lived and worked in a lot of different cultures. How has that kind of shaped your worldview and coaching style? And specifically, when you were writing this book, I'm sure that impacted how you approach this book.
Well, the book is an updated version of the PhD thesis. So the book's still very much academic in the sense of, lots of statistics, tables, charts, and, you know, whatnot. But it really, this is a very good question because it gives me the opportunity to tell what's coming next. Because I really felt as I was writing this version of the book, I felt like, okay, how can I translate all this methodology to look at critical events and make a methodology to help entrepreneurs go through those critical events and come out of them knowing better, with more resources to make decisions, being more aware of what they can learn, what kinds of resources they can access through connecting to the right people, through their own capacity of learning and generating new ideas. Uh, so, yes, the idea is to have in the upcoming future, I hope not very long in the future, sort of small booklets about different kinds of critical events with case studies and how entrepreneurs can actually act upon that kind of knowledge. That's part of the future plans for sort of spin-offs of this book,
And
less academic.
I know that I know that if you had to get, I know that if you had to guess a question of mine, it was going to be this. Can you give me two or three examples of what are some of the common, like you said, valley of death issues that come up in those first, you know,
Yeah.
that first window? What are some of the common things you've seen? Because you've worked with people cross culturally, so it must be a common theme among all these different small businesses. Can you give me two or three examples of some of the big problems that come up with these when you start a small business?
Yes, absolutely. I created a typology of 5 types of critical events, and I can give examples of the most common one, and that's how entrepreneurs can enter and survive in the market. Most of them have episodes about that. This is a kind of challenge that happens from day one until the 5th year and afterwards. Every decision to expand the business or shrink the business or to target a different kind of consumer, everything comes down to how to enter and survive in the market. And to give you one example of a technology business, These were two entrepreneurs coming out freshly out of university, and they had very nice, interesting idea, but it, they had no clue about how to put that in the market. So they struggled for a whole year. They dried up all their resources, and still they had nothing. When they finally learned through a business incubator, they learned that the business model wasn't good, that they had to learn about their product in the first place to be able to tell a professional seller how to sell that. And I'm talking about a lot of learning there. They had contact with a venture capitalist who looked at their technology and who was like, guys, you have no idea of the potential you have in your hands. You're looking at the wrong direction. Let's do and what is called these days the MVP. Back then, it didn't exist. This kind of new expression, and they just tried the market as many people in technology firms do. They didn't have the software developed, but they had the idea. They had a kind of prototype, and went out trying to sell that. They realized that the market wasn't ready for that technology. But what they learned from this second product was that they didn't have to spend any money to know that there was no market. There were strategies to try and see if there was demand for a certain kind of technology. They were too advanced for the technological infrastructure that there was in the country back then. So these are this one small business, but two different critical episodes. The first product, they didn't know how to sell, but it was there. And the second, the potential of that technology to sell something else. They had no idea. And I think it shows also how the ecosystem is so critical for entrepreneurs. Being a business incubator, being in contact with other people. And I'm not sure how this works in the US, but I can tell you that in Brazil and other developing countries, people are so afraid of sharing their idea. They're so afraid that people are going to steal their wonderful idea, that they don't share it with anyone. And the consequence
Well,
that they don't learn and they don't develop that in a way that it becomes something that is sellable, actually.
so it's funny you bring that up. I have this conversation with friends of mine that are starting different consulting businesses and stuff, and so it is that it's a common problem everywhere about the sharing of the idea because um, there's so much competition. And so even though you have this, so how do you overcome that? Like, how do you get out of that bubble of like being afraid to share something that somebody might steal your idea or your concept? How do you get through something like that?
First point is that most of this fear comes from a belief that your idea is ready to go and become something. And this, most of the times, this belief is not really real. You need to talk to people to try and test what you think others want to buy or acquire or whatever. So you need to share your, and I like when you say concept, people need to share the concept. They don't need to share the details of how that concept is going to come about. So there are some boundaries on what you can and cannot share, where you can and cannot share. Even in business incubators where you have access to the whole ecosystem, this means you also have access to competitors. And I have cases in the book where the competitor's just next door and he overhears a conversation, a business negotiation, and grabs your client just at the door and says, okay, I do the same thing for half a price. It does happen. And then, well, then we come to another part of the story that's also in the book, which is how support services can design systems to actually support entrepreneurs. So you don't put competitors next door. You try to put entrepreneurs that can have some synergies between them. So one can help develop the product or the service of the other. And then you have an ecosystem for growth instead of, a snake pit of competition.
So, Ariane, what's a business incubator? I've heard this, but I don't know what it is. Is this a common thing in the business world or entrepreneurship community?
It is a common thing, yes. You have different types of business incubators. And well, the expression incubator comes from the origin of the first incubators. They used to be in unused buildings that used to incubate chicken and things like that. So it was the business incubator. It worked as a metaphor, but it was also part of the physical environment where the first ones appeared. And these are spaces where entrepreneurs can come together with other stakeholders in the ecosystem. There could be business advisors, executive coaches, they could be government support organizations, um, but also venture capitalists, seed money investors, and whatnot. Universities sometimes, there are universities who run business incubators. So this is a way to do technological transfer from the university to the market with the support of actors from both environments. Uh, and all sorts of what we call basic services and strategic services. And then you have different levels of incubation programs. Basic services is basically, well, you're sharing space, you pay less of electricity, water, you share the basic cost of having a secretary, telephone bills, you name it, rental space. This is the basic kind of services. And then you have the strategic services, which is something that I explore in more detail in the book because they're so important and some incubators are not aware of them, which is providing this kind of growth oriented and learning oriented environment for entrepreneurs. And this is networking, this is training, this is putting entrepreneurs in pitch events to show what they're doing, preparing them for that, showing them the market. This is the really tailor-made kind of services. That's why they're so strategic, and that's why some incubators, when they have programs, sort of, with a track, and they call it strategic. It's not strategic. It's just training. It's like going to school. When it's strategic is contingent to the needs of that entrepreneur in that moment of that business. That's strategic.
Ariane, I have a question. Like I said, I can go on for hours with you because it can apply to so many aspects of your life, not just business. But one of the things I'm thinking about is I know, like you said, 90% you said developing countries, it's small businesses, entrepreneurs. They're the ones kind of are the motor of their economies. What percentage of these small businesses fail? And I know your job is to make sure they don't fail. What percentage of these small businesses fail?
Okay. That changes country by country. Uh, but even developed countries, it's a high percentage. And of course, there are different measures. Those metrics are not comparable, not always comparable between different countries. But it's safe to say that about 50% of all small businesses will fail in the first 3 to 5 years. That's a
And
lot.
what I find interesting about what you just said is piggybacking on what you just said. It sounds like, and this is the scary part to me, is that there's a lot of people that have amazing ideas and good concepts, but because they don't do the proper work ahead of time in terms of market research, in terms of knowing if that even exists or how do you even approach it, that's where someone like you comes in to give that strategic plan to put it together because I kind of know and could have kind of guessed in some ways that that would be an issue, but I really like what you said about like um, that company had a great idea, but they didn't even know if the market existed. They assumed that the market existed because I hear this all the time, like I have a good idea, I have a good idea, but it probably is a good idea, but if you don't even know that market exists or even how to approach entering that market, you may not ever even have the resources or know or have the connections or networking to ever enter it. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And because if you keep it too much yourself, you can never be out there. There is one market, for instance, where there is very high global competition. That's in the handcraft market. I can give you one very simple example. I have a very nice necklace that a friend of mine from Bangladesh gave to me. Then I went for holidays in Brazil. People in those sort of hippie fairs, they were selling the same necklace, same color, same shape, same everything. It's handicraft. They probably saw someone coming from any other country, vice versa, someone from Brazil going to Bangladesh or Bangladesh going to Brazil. They saw that. It's easy to imitate. So for some sectors, the entry barriers are very low. It's easy to imitate. So if an entrepreneur has an idea that's really innovative, it's really something that's not out there, they are going to need an ecosystem to support the development of that idea in a way that it can be in the market, be disruptive, be innovative, and thrive. Because alone, that's not possible.
And how is your PC in economic development? How has that helped you in writing the book and developing your approach to how to help entrepreneurs?
Uh, that's a great question because it brings back to what I was just saying on expanding, sharing your ideas with people who are not natural, people with whom you would share your ideas. I was a psychologist wanting to study learning, but I was in an institute for development economics. So I had two supervisors, economists who didn't know about psychology and I didn't know about economics. So I had to share everything with them and they had to ask questions about what that meant, by the way. And then we could start a dialogue in which by explaining to them what I meant and by them explaining to me what those concepts in economics meant, then we came up with something that is innovative. It's a book that's not anywhere else. And it creates a new knowledge with new tools that can actually help not only entrepreneurs, but business development services. That's the beauty of it, I think.
And then how did your work? I'm going to throw this in here because I didn't mention this before. This is a hidden gem here. How did your work at the United Nations help shape how you look at the world?
Yeah. Okay. What I do for the United Nations organizations is evaluation. So I work as an independent evaluator for projects, programs, and institutional evaluations. That means that I am the external pair of eyes looking at what different UN organizations are doing in the field for checks and balances. It's accountability, but it's also learning. So what's the best way of delivering certain programs? And I think this is a good convergence of interests. I was already in this development economics world. I had just came out of my PhD when I had the first opportunity to work for the International Labour Organization in a team. I was part of a team of evaluators. And it was just so amazing to see how everything connected. And for me, it is a way to not only understand the world, but because I write recommendations to improve those projects, it feels like helping those project managers to deliver better for the world. So for me, it's one way. to achieve something that for me is the most meaningful thing in life, that is helping the world become a better place for everyone.
So let me ask you this.
And
This is going to be a interesting question in some ways. I have to ask you this. Did is it difficult to manage, like, because you're working for the UN, but and you work internationally, do you ever encounter like cultural barriers in terms of approaches to business that you were like, oh, I've never thought about this before. Oh, this is a tough one. Like, how do I get through this? Because what I find that's pretty amazing about you, and it's very different, is because you work internationally, and so and you speak multiple languages, and but you're still helping these entrepreneurs in all these different cultures. Has that been a difficult thing for you to navigate, or has it been a learning process for you?
thanks for this question. I think that from the coaching perspective, there are commonalities across cultures, um, rich, poor countries, developing countries. There are commonalities in terms of how entrepreneurs as people relate to what they're doing in their businesses. So some commonalities are, okay, I'm going to bring up two of them. Fear of failure. What if it doesn't work? What do I do? I'm going to lose the money. Or what do I do with my reputation? My reputation is at stake, especially when we are talking about entrepreneurship that's knowledge based. It's the knowledge of that entrepreneur that is at stake. So it's a bit like her career is at stake for every contract you take, basically. So there's this fear that what if they don't like what I'm doing? What if, you know? So fear is one. The other one that's very, very important, self-talk. When, and we all do that. We question ourselves. Am I the good person to do that? Am I really fit for this? Do I have what it takes? For how long can I give all and a little bit more of what I have in terms of time, energy, financial resources, no time for family, and things like that? So that's, and this kind of self talk is something that we do a lot in coaching to help entrepreneurs re signify their beliefs in a way that they see their strengths. So I work a lot with strength. How can you work with your teamwork strength? How can you share the load with other people? Um, or any other strength you can think of, like hope is another strength. How can you use hope to your favor? Not in a kind of, inaccurate or dreamy way, but in a very conscious way. Where can you hope that things are going to work? What do you need to do to make it happen? So it's a combination of awareness raising and action taking.
I love that. So you work with you work with someone's strength, but what I really love about you too is you'll also point out, like, hey, this is not in a nice way, in a coaching way. Um, with entrepreneurs and people that you're coaching, including students, I know you also help students in their academic journeys as well. Is, hey, if you're not necessarily going to say it's a weakness, but you're going to say, hey, if this is not working, you might want to like you're kind of pushing them to what their strength is, um, because you can see as this outside person, as this coach, you're able to using a lens from the outside to see something that the person that's maybe working on the business or having these challenges, you're seeing those things that they're not. So you're kind of walking them through to get them through those sticking points, correct?
Correct, yes. And this is a very important point because when we look at the strengths, what the research has shown is that when you invest in your strength, your gains are much higher. You go much further than when you look at your weaknesses and then you try to improve that. There's a concept in economics that's called the marginal gain. So the marginal gain, when you try to do something that's not natural to you, that you're struggling, You have to put a lot more effort to have just one little step up the ladder. But if you go with what's natural to you, with your strength, with what you're good at, with what is working already, you just amplify that, then your marginal gain is much, much higher. So maybe there's another kind of bottom line lesson here that no entrepreneur can be good at everything in the job. They know at least the minimum of everything. They need to know how to sell. They need to know how to deal with investors and whatnot. But what is it that they're really, really good at? This is where most of the attention and efforts should be focused on, because this is where is the well-known Pareto's law that 80% of our outcomes come out of 20% of our efforts. If you know where to put the right efforts,
Oh,
and that yes, but yeah, this so it has become very popular. But what I think is missing that popularity is that what's behind that nice, combination of numbers, and what's behind that is that you have to know your strength
all
to
right.
put that 10% of effort in the right place.
That's why I love having you on the podcast because I have to write all these notes for myself. so I so
Okay,
I think our
good.
listeners, and that's the good thing, everybody out there. If you want to have more of Ariane, you have to connect with her. I'll give you her contact information. But let me ask you,
Okay.
what is your most meaningful professional turning point in your life? What kind of has been the most impactful thing in your life since you started your work?
Wow, that's a difficult one. Most impactful. I think the most impactful because it was yeah, a big watershed moment was when I went to do my PhD in the Netherlands. Even if I couldn't really follow all classes or anything, but I was so motivated and so full of passion for that. It was like the only opportunity in life to just be there. That was the feeling I had. It was really important. I would ask every professor to voice record all classes to just listen back when I was home because I couldn't follow the English back then. And now I can even teach in English, which is like, wow, it's a big turning point in life. And I think professionally, this has opened a whole world of people, cultures we had just to have to give you some idea. It was a very small institute, like 100 students more or less, and we had more than 60 countries together. I had the opportunity to try all kinds of foods, to hear all kinds of languages and accents and stories. And we had the cultural night once a year. It was just so much. It felt so much like being in the microcosmos of the whole world was in one single place. And I've made so many good friends that I still have. So I think that was the big change that professionally opened doors, windows, roofs, everything.
So let me ask you this: what's the difference between um, a certified mentor coach and executive coach? Is a certified mentor coach the same as an executive coach, or are they kind of one? What's the difference between the two?
Difference is in the training. It means that when I'm a certified mentor coach, it means that I can coach in basically any topics. So life coaching, some people may call it. Um, so it's a kind of certification that I have all the basic skills to coach any kind of issue, at least on a basic level. And the executive coaching certification means that I did a lot of extra training to help entrepreneurs, leaders, managers, CEOs, and people in charge of making decisions to make better decisions. So it's In the training, it's a different package of classes, trainings, exercise, and it's like it's two certifications because it's two sets of competencies.
It must be difficult to have this much education. You have so much schooling. It's just like, oh my God, I don't even know where to start. Let me ask you, what drew you to this profession?
The coaching, you mean?
Just the coaching, the entrepreneurship,
Ah,
and this all your organizational side. What drove you to all this? Because it's pretty amazing. Like what it seems like you have such a passion for it. You said that your family started businesses, but you really love what you do. I mean, uh, I guess what drives you like this? What drives you like it? What keeps that flame burning for you?
I think the first place is curiosity. I want to learn. I ask questions. I ask too many questions, actually. I think this is, well, we've been working together for a while. Uh, I've been asking many more questions than answering questions, and I like asking questions. I think we learn a lot more by asking than by answering questions. And I'm curious. I'm like, yeah. So, for instance, psychology, so interesting. Yeah, organizational psychology. Yeah, we understand the people in organizations, but organizations are in ecosystems as well. They're part of the economy. So yeah, what about the economic part of this whole thing? And then I go and I do a PhD in economics. It's a little bit like that. I'm curious and I'm really, really passionate about research. My main goal when I went for the PhD was to become a researcher, like full-time researcher. But this kind of job position doesn't exist in Brazil, not for psychology or not like that. It exists for statisticians and for some economists, but like pure, so-called pure economists. Um, you cannot be just full-time researcher, so I had to go for teaching as well. Uh, so that is one this one passion, and I think research is searching for knowledge. Research, searching for what? For knowledge. That's one thing. And the coaching, I think, brought me this huge satisfaction of seeing the results right there, changing people's lives. And I love that sparkle when I have a female leader saying, "Ah, I did that. It worked. Now I have a different relationship with my team. That's so amazing. Never thought I could do that." That kind of wow. I feel so proud of all of them. That I think it's a new passion and it's a beautiful one.
So I know you probably get this question a lot. It's very controversial nowadays. I believe one thing about it, and other people believe other things about it. But the whole concept of hybrid work and whether companies can be successful or not with hybrid work or with just teleworking generally. In some organizations, um, telework has allowed people to save money because they don't have to pay for the overhead of buildings. Some people have argued, well, that it hurts building, community building, and I think in some ways it can because you're not interacting in person. But there's other arguments about, well, you know what, when you're in the office, you probably only work because you socialize more than you work. Your output actually goes down, so there's arguments made on either. I think nowadays there's pretty good arguments on either side. Um, what is your kind of view on hybrid working and teleworking and you can give a down the middle answer, which I think is probably it depends on each organization. But what is your kind of overall view of hybrid working? Do you think it can be successful teleworking? What is your kind of overall with your experience? What has been your experience with it?
Okay, that's such a timely question. When was it? Like 2 weeks back? Yeah, about 2 weeks back. some days back. I was in a kind of immersion workshop about hybrid work with one of the best ones in the world. That's Professor Demiruti from Delft. She's great. She works in Delft, and I think the first part of the answer is a very psychological joke kind of answer, but it depends. And it's not about the middle ground. It's more about a nuanced perspective on hybrid work. So hybrid work may work more for some people than for others. Who are the people it works best? So we have some research in Brazil, for instance, that shows that in developing countries in general, that's also true. The UN has research on that as well. Uh, Women with young children doing telework during COVID with no school, no other support service, no nothing. That's a big disaster. Not only for productivity, but for well-being, mental health, development of even the children and everything. So this is not ideal. So if organizations want to have uh, productive hybrid work, let's put it this way, they need to do at least two parts of the job. The first part is to have a clear policy for hybrid work. What is hybrid work for this organization? Who are the people or what are the tasks that can go to hybrid work, to telework? What are the tasks that need to be done on site in the organization? Be clear about that. How can managers authorize on site who is going to go for telework and when? You need a clear policy. You need to design that at the organizational level. The other part of it is supporting employees to design their telework space properly. What kinds of equipment they need? What's the posture where they work? Do they have a proper work setting, or are they just putting a laptop on the dining table with everyone around? So how can you ensure that? How do you ensure confidentiality if you have a job that deals with personal data, for instance, health information, insurance stuff? So companies need to help employees design their telework space in a way that is not only productive, but it's also uh, good for the well-being of the employee. For some employees, hybrid work's not the solution, but for others, it may be. Just to give you one example of how the environment plays a role there. If you work in an open space and you're a coach, you cannot coach in an open space office. How do you do with the confidentiality? I may have headphones on, but I'm speaking. There is an image, there's a video. This is not suitable for open space environments. You need either you go to telework or you have a specific setting that ensures confidentiality, privacy, etc. So it's a long answer, but I think it shows some nuances that hybrid work is a big word that implies lots of policies and support and thinking about tasks and how employees can perform better in a way that is supportive as well. And one of the things that will never work well is having a hidden software counting how many times you click on your keyboard. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. Sorry for putting it this way, but
But
that's
but
just
but
ridiculous.
but why? Can you say why that is? Because I heard some companies are doing that, but why do you think that? What is the research behind it? What's the thinking? Because I mean, this is what you do. So why
Yeah.
is that?
There's no research behind that. Companies do that because they don't trust their employees and because they don't understand the tasks that employees perform. When I do an evaluation for the UN, I spend 2 to 3 hours reading documents in a row, 2 or 3 hours in a row. The only thing I do is just, moving the page down just to keep reading. I'm not dragging my keyboard at all.
Oh, yes,
And I'm
correct.
doing very intensive cognitive and focused work. If I need to think that I need to strike the keyboard, so my company knows if I was working for a company, if my company knows, so my company knows I'm working because I'm clicking on the keyboard. What kind of deep work am I doing? It's counterproductive.
Correct.
There's no research to support that.
Yeah,
It's the
yes.
opposite. That's
Gotcha.
why I'm saying, I'm sorry, it's ridiculous because it is. You want your employee to perform better, and then you put a system that disturbs them every 2 minutes.
Yeah, I had this conversation with somebody. I said the most critical part for having um, telework employees is the first step is to hire good employees that fit that model. Because, if you have a worker that you have to watch all the time, and so your argument is, well, I better have them in the office because my question is, why did you hire that person anyway? I mean, you hired that person if you don't have any trust in their work ethic and that they can accomplish the work, and now you're afraid they're going to telework. Why did you hire them? So I think it's very important to have hire people that you have a belief that they're doing what they're doing at that here. And like you said, setting goals and hey, this is the work that we expect you to do. It's due on this date. Here's our expectations. And if they meet those goals, it's fine. Um,
Yes,
but but if you're hiring people that you really don't trust, and like you said, you have to watch every keyboard, then my question is, there's an issue with your hiring because you don't have any faith in in the people you supervise and you hire. And I think that goes to organizational culture because
yes,
if everybody in your organizational culture believes that you don't trust them and that you're watching them all the time, I have a hard time believing that someone's going to work really hard for you because you automatically are thinking, do they really have our best interests in heart? Why should I work hard if this organization doesn't have my best interests at heart? And I think that I love what you say about that because I've never heard anyone say it like that, but you're absolutely correct. Let me ask you, I'm going to ask you one more question. I know we only have an hour. Usually I don't, well, I could go on a couple hours with you. But people can get a hold of you after this podcast, after you give your contact information. What do you
absolutely.
do in organizations where, and I know that you probably hear this in the coaching and entrepreneur portion is competition and like trust issues. If you have in organizations, I work in an organization where everybody's kind of, I'm just saying an example wise. What if I worked in an organization where, you know, people are always backbiting or there's competition for positions or there's no trust? What advice do you give to somebody if they work in those kind of organizations to kind of get through that or to focus on their own tasks in an organization so it doesn't pull them down? Do you get those kind of questions about the competitions with the organizations kind of tearing those organizations down? What do you do in those kind of situations?
Okay, I can answer that from a more kind of coaching perspective, maybe, um, because we are talking about perceptions there. You perceive competition, you perceive people, you perceive you need to look over your shoulder all every time, you perceive that your boss not valuing your work. And first step, I think, is to try and test that perception in terms of how real it is. If it is real, is it a cultural thing? Is it a personal thing? If it's a cultural thing, leave the organization. Don't stay where you're suffering. There are other jobs. We are back to the strength again. Use your strength to find where you belong. There are many, many, many places where you can go. From the perspective of managers, this has to do with trust also for hybrid work and all kinds of trust. What we observe is that a bad manager is a bad manager no matter what format the work takes. Could be hybrid, could be remote, could be on site. A bad manager is a bad manager, is someone who is not going to trust, is someone who is not going to give autonomy, is someone who's not going to give the employee the opportunity to craft their own job in a way that's better for mental health, physical health, and productivity. So, and of course, there are organizations with horrible cultures. There's one case, it's not detailed in the book, but this entrepreneur came to me after the interview for the book and he was like, please help me. Because he was tracking his employees. It was a tech company. It was very easy for him to track what people were doing. And he noticed that their employees were working like 10% of the paid time. Rest of the time they were on social media or searching for other jobs, fixing their CVs and things like that. His associate was responsible for the technical part. The associate was in charge of managing the team, but this associate couldn't manage the team. So it's a whole, we need to look at the organizational level of things and how those relationships play a role. And at the end of the day, in this organization, what happened was that this associate left. He wasn't even interested in that business. He left and he left with all the employees like doing whatever. So the other guy who was the salesman for that organization had to step in and rebuild the whole thing again. Much smaller, of course, less people, on the people who could really work. Um, so there's not one single advice, I think. I think for every situation, we need to diagnose. We need to look at what is happening. If it's cultural, if it's relational, if it is personality, if it is a matter of communication. Communication is very important. People communicate so badly everywhere. So external people like coaches or facilitators, uh, executive consultants, they come and they build this safe environment where people can start talking to each other without negative consequences. Because when this happens, this kind of competition internally happening, this means people are competing for resources. So you need to understand what kinds of resources are at stake. But they won't do that by themselves. They need help from someone from outside. It's how
Ariane,
I've seen it.
Ariane, this has been an amazing interview. Like I said, I could go on and on, but you know what? If anybody wants to get a hold of you out there in your services for a certified mentor coach and executive coaching and um, entrepreneurness, working with businesses and start entrepreneurs and business starters and startups, what is the best way to get a hold of you um, on
LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
how do they find you on LinkedIn?
Either by my name, Ariane Corradi, that's my personal page, but it's also possible there to add me and then send me a message and then we keep in touch. Or the business page on LinkedIn as well. It's also possible to keep in touch through that channel. The business page describes a little bit of what I can offer. It may clarify a few things, so it's good to look
And
through.
I'll put your LinkedIn page on for our listeners. I'll put the LinkedIn page on the podcast information areas and also your book.
That's
So
perfect.
yes,
Yes.
and so
The business page, maybe this helps, I'm not sure, but it's from Ariane, just A, Corradi Consulting. That's all.
can you spell it
Very
out,
simple.
Ariane, for our listeners that don't have
Yeah.
access to a computer
So
necessarily?
ACORRADI Consulting. You put that on LinkedIn, you're gonna find me.
Well, I appreciate you so much for being on here, taking the time this morning. I know it's late over there in Europe. What time is it in Europe right now?
It's 8 p.m. dinner
8 p.m.
time.
on a Friday, on a Friday. But I
Yes.
appreciate. I know you guys don't celebrate the Thanksgiving. This is one day after Thanksgiving. One day after Thanksgiving here.
Ah,
You guys don't
that's
have that,
right.
but you have Christmas coming up,
Oh,
and I know you guys have Black Friday, which is weird to me because I thought Black Friday started here in the States, but I guess Black Friday is everywhere now. I know it's big in Brazil, so but But I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. We'll have to have you on again. And, so much insight, so much knowledge. I really look up to you. You're an amazing person. And till next time, everybody, until we have our next amazing guest like Ariane. Thank you. And we'll talk to you and we will
Thank
see you
you.
next
It's been a
time.
pleasure. Thank you. Bye
Take
bye.
care. Take care, everybody.